Hello, and welcome once again to Lehto's Law. I'm Steve Lehto, attorney at law in the state of Michigan, where I've been practicing law for 26 years in the fields of consumer protection and lemon law. I often write about this stuff for places like roadandtrack.com, and I've written a few books. In fact, today is episode 4.26. And for those people who are into numbers, of course, 426 is the infamous displacement of the Chrysler Hemi. So I wrote a book called Dodge Daytona Plymouth Superbird. There's a lot of Hemis in this book. If you're interested in a copy of this book, email me directly at my email address at the end that I'll give you, and I'll send you a copy of this. We can work out a deal where you get it for less than Amazon. I'll sign it. I'll send it to you. So if you like the winged cars, I've got two of them behind me. They often had Hemis in them, as the way God intended. Today we're going to talk about what attorneys are really afraid of. What attorneys are really afraid of. And I'm bringing this up because I often tell people, if you've got an idea for a podcast, go ahead and send me a question. But I often go through the comments underneath my videos and that are made to my podcasts, and I look for things in there that might spark an idea for a podcast. And my most recent video about the pizza car got quite a few views and also quite a few comments. Last time I checked, it was close to 600 comments. And I read all the comments. I've got nothing better to do. And most of the comments are very thoughtful, and there's a bunch of times people will raise something and say, you didn't really address this, you didn't really address that. And, we'll have a little discussion underneath the comments. And every now and then, someone will just jump in to call me names, let off a string of profanities, and then tell me to go screw myself. And I'm being nice there because that's not the language they often use. And I don't know what encourages people to do that, because in case you haven't figured this out, if you come onto my YouTube channel, for instance, and call me a bunch of names and use profanities, I will delete your comment. And I'm sorry, that's just me. I realize that makes me like Hitler, as I've discussed in a previous podcast. But I can't leave just profanities there, because to me that doesn't add anything to any discussion. I know this is America. I assume these people are Americans who are posting this. They think it's the First Amendment, whatnot. But quite frankly, you're not moving the ball forward by calling me names. So one of the funnier comments that I had to delete it, which kind of bums me out, because it's the comment that inspired today's podcast. And in the last week's video, I talked about how the guy who bought the pizza car was in a gray area where he could possibly make an argument that might win. But I pointed out that his adversary is a very, very large corporation with tons and tons of money. And I pointed out that he could end up fighting a gigantic fight that he very well could lose, and the net result would be that he just simply spent a pile of money and accomplished nothing. So I said, why not work out some kind of compromise? Because I said that I'm a problem solver. And somebody commented with a string of profanities, calling me a bunch of names, and then they said, this guy, referring to me, and by the way, if you make comments on videos, feel free to address me in the second person. You can say, hey, Steve, what do you think of this? Or say, hey, Steve, I think this about you. But when you say, hey, this guy's an idiot, in the third person, I don't know why that bugs me also, but this guy wrote and he said, this guy is a lemon law attorney, and he wants to represent you in your lemon law claims, but he's scared of big corporations. Would you hire someone to handle your lemon law claim who's scared of big corporations? And that was the phrase he used. He said he's scared of big corporations. That's the phrase he used when he wasn't swearing and calling me names. But here's the thing. I'm not scared of big corporations, and neither are any of the attorneys I know. But I do know what attorneys are really afraid of. And this is the kind of thing that I don't know why, but it just dawned on me that a lot of people don't understand this. You can find people who are scared of spiders. You can find people who are scared of snakes. You can find people who are scared of all kinds of things. And I suppose if you're in a profession, if you're a police officer, what are you scared of? I assume you're probably scared of somebody on the side of the road pulling a gun on you. I mean, that's what I'd be scared of. If you're a fireman, what are you scared of? I don't know, a building collapsing on you while you're trying to put out a fire, right? Those are things that you'd legitimately be scared of in those professions. So what are you scared of as an attorney? And for someone to say this guy's scared of big corporations, number one, it's not true. And it doesn't even make any sense. And it's a knee-jerk response, I guess, because the guy didn't understand what I was saying. I didn't say Sam should roll over on his trademark claim simply because he's facing a big corporation. I said that I would consider it simply because you'd be more than likely spinning your wheels, accomplishing nothing but spending money, And when all you're doing is spending money against somebody who's got more money than you do, it seems to me to be what we call fool's errand. So the person who commented said, he's afraid of big corporations. He's scared of big corporations. And that was a statement made about me. But I'm going to be generous here and say I think he's actually referring to many attorneys. He's not saying I, as an attorney, just me, have this fear, because it's not true about me. And it's easy enough to prove about me. So, for instance, I can tell you that in my 26 years of handling lemon law claims, of which I've handled thousands and thousands of lemon law claims, I don't lay awake at night worried about suing GM, Ford, Chrysler, Nissan, Honda, Kia, or any other manufacturer of automobiles, because I've sued them all. I've sued them all many times. I can tell you right now that I had a friend who worked at a big corporation, one of the big corporations that I sue a lot. They build cars. And he called me up one day and said, Steve, congratulations. And I said, what's that? And he said, we recently ran a list of attorneys nationwide who are suing us. Okay? And he said, right now, you're on the list. You have more lawsuits against us than all but a handful of attorneys nationwide. And he said, none of those attorneys do lemon law. So of lemon law attorneys in the country, you have more lawsuits against us than any other attorney out there. So obviously, I'm not scared of them. I sue them all the time. Like I said, I've sued GM, Ford, Chrysler, Nissan, Honda, Kia, etc. so many times I can't even count, literally. So if I was scared of them, why would I keep suing them? That doesn't make any sense. So I actually thought to myself, how do you quantify big corporations that the commenter said that I'm scared of? I'm scared of these big corporations that I sue all the time. And I went and looked, and now these lists can be found in a variety of different places. You can find them on Fortune.com's website, the Fortune magazine. But I simply went to Wikipedia because I understand that some of their stuff might not be right on, but it's going to be close, okay? And I went down the list of the top 35 corporations in the world based on revenue. The top 35 corporations in the world based on revenue. And I have personally sued number 5, number 6, number 10, number 17, number 18, number 21, and number 29. Okay? And many times. And in case you're curious how big are these corporations, number 29 is Honda. Okay? So obviously, I'm not scared of those big corporations. I sue them all the time. And then I thought to myself, who else have I sued as far as corporations go? Well, I've sued Sears. Now, I know Sears isn't what they used to be. But when I sued them, they were. I sued Sears back in the 90s. And Sears at the time was one of the largest corporations in the world. I've likewise sued Allstate, State Farm, you name all these different insurance companies. I've sued them all. And insurance companies, as you might know, also have tons and tons of money, okay? So I'm clearly not scared of big corporations. But here's the thing about the comment and the commenter who made it, saying he's scared of big corporations. I think inherently a lot of people believe that attorneys sometimes are scared of big corporations. And the reason I say that is I've had people call me before and say, Steve, I've got a lawsuit I want to file. I want you to represent me in suing some big corporation, whether it's GM, Ford, or Chrysler, or just some other big corporation, that doesn't build cars but builds something else, okay? An airline, for instance. Oh, wait, I've sued an airline before. Just remembered that. So I've had people call me and say, Steve, I want to sue a big corporation. And I say, okay. And they say, well, are you willing to do that? And they think that the threshold question is how big the corporation is versus how big of a corporation you're scared of. I'm not scared of big corporations, and most attorneys aren't. I've never met an attorney, who's legitimately scared of a big corporation. And the reason is that attorneys aren't scared by the size of their opponents. We're not. Because what scares an attorney, this is what attorneys are really afraid of, is they're worried about bad cases, okay? They're worried about the merits of their case, and is the case worth pursuing? So if someone comes into my office and says, Steve, I'm going to hire you, gun to your head, you've got to represent me, okay? My biggest fear is that they've got no case, because I don't want to go to the trouble of filing a case that's going to lose. I don't like losing, okay? If you come into my office with a good case, congratulations. That's a great case. Let's file it. And you say, Steve, what about the size of the corporation? The defendant is big. What doesn't that worry you? That they're big? They're big and scary. No, no. Attorneys like big corporations because they've got lots of money. And I have had good cases that resulted in no recovery because the defendants were small and went out of business. And I taught law school for 10 years. I used to tell all my students this. I say, you have to understand there's a certain amount of fool's gold in the legal field where someone's going to come into your office with what appears to be a great case on the merits. Because someone's come in and they say, hey, here are the merits of my case. Look what happened to me. And you're like, oh my gosh, the liability is there. And then the question simply is, okay, are there damages? And if there are damages, is this person collectible that you want to sue? Because we've all had that happen. I have personally gotten hundreds of thousands of dollars in judgments against companies that went belly up. They just disappeared. You get a piece of paper, it says you're entitled to money. It does you no good. It's a piece of paper. You can't spend it. The only piece of paper you can ever spend is the ones that say, legal tender on them that are, U.S. currency. You get a piece of paper from a judge that says, here's a judgment, okay? You can't spend that judgment. You have to make good on the judgment. So all we worry about is whether the case is any good and if the defendant's collectible. So ironically, the most collectible defendants in the world are big corporations. It's the exact opposite of what you'd think. So if someone comes into my office and says, hey, Steve, I've got a case. Someone wronged me, okay? Very, very generically, they wronged me. And I can prove 100% liability on their part. I can prove gigantic damages. Do you want to take that same case against the big corporation or against the little corporation? I'll take it all day long against the big corporation. I might not take it against the little corporation. And I have people who call me up and they say, Steve, I've got a case that I want to pursue where somebody did something to me. And on a matter of principle, I want to pursue it. And I always say, okay, is there any money involved? And they say, well, no, but there's principle involved. And I say, okay, it's all fine and dandy. I can't pay my bills with your principal or a third of your principal if we do it on a contingency, okay? There's got to be some kind of way to collect at the end of this rainbow for us to pursue it. Otherwise, it's not worth pursuing. And I know people who say, Steve, but, come on, let's look at the movies, for instance, where some young whippersnapper goes in against long odds and fights the good fight and proves some point, despite the fact that no one ever gets paid, okay? I have taken one or two of those cases in my career where I knew going in the odds being paid are pretty slim. But you also learn that, like I said, you can't spend that, okay? And I run a business. I got phone bills to pay. I've got, lights to keep on and so on. So you can't spend that kind of stuff. So you always have to have a way to collect on the liability and the damages that someone's committed. So when someone comes into my office, all else being equal, and they say, Steve, I've got a great case. I've been harmed. The harm is quite large. The liability is easy to prove. Let me tell you who the defendant is. Deep down, I'm going, please, praying to whoever you pray to, please make it be a big corporation. I'd rather have it be a big corporation than a mom and pop store. I'd rather it be a big corporation than an individual, okay? And I've seen cases where the biggest damages were done by an individual who had no assets, who had no insurance, who had no way to be collected against, who was basically judgment proof. And corporations, generally speaking, aren't judgment proof. People often are. So no one I know of, no attorneys I know of, are afraid of big corporations. I certainly am not. As I pointed out, I've sued, like I said, 5, 6, 10, 17, 18, 21, and 29 of the top 35 corporations. And that's before I remembered the airline I've sued. I'd have to go look to see if they're on that list or not. But I like big corporations. I like suing big corporations. Big corporations have kept me in business by settling cases I file against them. And by the way, I've tried cases against them also and gotten judgments and so on. But I like suing big corporations. So the idea that I or any other attorney are scared of suing a big corporation, it's not only wrong, but it's actually the opposite of reality. I'd rather sue a big corporation than a small company or someone who's an individual who's not collectible. So the notion that attorneys can be scared of that doesn't even make any sense. It's illogical and it's diseconomical because attorneys, as you might imagine, want to make a living. And the way you make a living is by getting good cases against collectible defendants and then succeeding in your litigation. And the most collectible defendants are the big corporations. So as far as the commenter goes, I'm not scared of big corporations, but neither are most attorneys I know. Most attorneys I know are looking for the cases against the big corporations. So next time you think, hey, I've got a good case, but I wonder if any attorney out there will take it, because unfortunately the defendant is a big corporation, lead with that when you call an attorney. Say, hey, I got a good case against this corporation. And you're going to have all their attention, undivided, as you then explain what happened to you and why you think these people owe you money, okay? Don't start with, I don't know if you want to take my case because it's against a big corporation. Because if you say that, my first thought is, okay, this person doesn't even understand how this works, because I like the cases against the big corporations. So that's what attorneys are really afraid of. It's not the big corporations. What they're really afraid of is weak cases against anybody, okay? Because if you have a weak case against an individual or a weak case against a big corporation, in either case, you get nothing. I'm scared of weak cases. So what attorneys are really afraid of, weak or bad cases or uncollectible defendants, assuming you do plaintiff work. But what we like the most, and by the way, this applies to defense attorneys. So you say, Steve, half the world out there is defense attorneys, right? So if someone defends big corporations, what are they afraid of? What they're afraid of is being sued where their defense is weak. Okay? I bring a good case against a corporation. The defense attorney often calls me to settle because what he's scared of is how weak his defense is, how weak the case is. So what attorneys are really afraid of is weak cases, but we aren't scared of big corporations. And if you want to accuse me of something like that in a future video like this one, feel free to do so, and just don't insert the expletives, and I'll leave it up. But I won't leave up the profanities. I'm sorry. So questions or comments, as always, shoot them my way, lehtoslaw.com. This show is on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Podbean, Google Play, and YouTube. Thanks for watching and listening. Bye-bye.